You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 11th of July 2025 on Monocle Radio.
The PKK ceremonially destroys a few of its guns. Are they serious about the rest? Is the United States an ally of Ukraine again? And what happens when an entire French town is turned into a photography gallery? I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests analyse Smith, Julia Lasica, Chris Cermak, Monica Lillis, Matt Beeman and Alex Milnes will discuss today's big stories, and we'll have our weekly assessment of the degree to which the last 7 days have enlarged our general understanding. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller. Earlier today in Iraqi Kurdistan, a small ceremony was held in which a few dozen members of the Kurdish Workers' Party, better known as the PKK, burned their rifles in a cauldron. It was a symbolic demonstration of a wider disarmament expected as part of the PKK's recent announcement that it was out of the armed struggle business after 40 years of war with Turkey. Well, I'm joined now by Monocle's Istanbul correspondent, Hannah Lucinda Smith. Hannah, obviously today's thing was a media event, but has it been getting much play in Turkey in particular?
Absolutely. I mean, this was so well covered in the Turkish press today. You had all the kind of top correspondents from all the TV channels, all of which, or almost all of which, we should say, are loyal to President Erdogan, going to cover this, quite small scale, actually, and very symbolic ceremony where PKK members kind of put their weapons into a big metal drum and then set fire to them. Of course, this is a moment that's been months in the making. We've had the agreement between the PKK and Turkey. This is very much a symbolic step. But really the question is, how much all the different parts of the PKK scattered right across 4 countries in this region are going to listen to that ceasefire.
I mean, this is, as you suggest, only a very small amount of the PKK's arsenal, but does it seem like they actually are serious about destroying all the rest as well?
Certainly some parts of the PKK, definitely the PKK in Turkey and also in northern Iraq, where they have their strongholds. That's why this ceremony was held close to Sulaymaniyah today. The bigger problem is the PKK offshoot in Syria, the YPG, which fought incredibly effectively against ISIS, won US and other Western backing. It's been a kind of thorn in the side for Erdogan and Turkey for the past decade. They claim a degree of separateness from the rest of the PKK. They also follow the same ideology and the same leader. But it remains to be seen what kind of peace deal can be cut out between Turkey and the YPG in Syria, and of course also including the new government in Damascus.
Is it clear what the PKK are getting out of this? One assumes that they did not decide to lay down their arms after 40 years of, often quite gruesome struggle just out of a sudden seizure of goodwill. Some sort of agreement must have been reached, surely.
Absolutely. I mean, the PKK, apart from in Syria, if we look at Turkey and Iraq, has really been sort of hammered by Turkish security forces over the past decade. Back in 2015, when the last ceasefire broke down, there was a real uptick of urban fighting in southeastern Turkey. Local youth connected to the PKK, the Turkish army and special forces police came in incredibly strongly. It pushed the PKK really back to the mountains, back to the rural areas in Turkey. Also, meanwhile, in Iraq, increasingly in recent years, Turkey using its drone power against the PKK bases there. So it's really been beaten back in those 2 places. Also, diplomatically, we're seeing growing sort of cooperation between Ankara and Baghdad as well. Really, they have been sort of beaten back to a position. But President Erdogan is offering Turkey's Kurdish population some kind of favours, or let's say some remittances in a new constitution that he wants to draw up. It remains to be seen what those will be, but Kurds will be hoping for things like language rights, cultural rights, things that at the moment are pretty shaky in Turkey.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will doubtless frame this as a great triumph, and if indeed he has managed to bring an end to a 40-year-long war, he is doubtless entitled to claim some credit. Is there not a concern from his perspective, though, that he might end up rather missing the PKK? Doesn't an authoritarian like him need an enemy to rally the country against?
Yeah, I mean, the PKK has definitely proved very, very useful to him again and again in the time that I've been in Turkey. Seen him, when he's looking a bit shaky domestically, sort of stirring a new war with the PKK or one of their franchises. But we've seen since the start of this year, he's turning his attentions to a new enemy, which is the CHP, the main secularist party. Now they're the ones who are under attack from the courts. We're seeing CHP mayors in the municipalities controlled by the party being raided by police, mayors being taken into custody. Yeah, hundreds of civil servants working for those municipalities arrested as well. And it looks, the position that the CHP is in now is pretty much what the main Kurdish party was 6 or 7 years ago.
Going back to the PKK, though, do we understand what the end point of this is? Does this culminate in a dramatic release of their longtime leader, Abdullah Öcalan, from his prison island? Does it mean the PKK turning into a political party? And would the Turkish public accept either of those things? Because it is often one of the difficulties with bringing any kind of civil conflict to a close, is that you do have to persuade people who may have suffered greatly to kind of, if not forgive, then tolerate the people who did them harm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think on the political side of it, Turks are already accepting of Kurdish politics. I wouldn't say the Kurdish parties are overwhelmingly popular, but certainly the HDP, a decade ago managed to reach out beyond its Kurdish base and really attract sort of liberal, disenfranchised, especially young Turks here in Western Turkey. So I think that's sort of easier part of it. Abdullah Öcalan is a more difficult question. He's been locked up on this island since the year 2000. He sort of still serves as this sort of spiritual leader. He's undergone a bit of an ideological transformation in the time that he's been locked up, turned into this sort of quite sort of leftist environmentalist figure. But it is a problem. If he is released, there's such a target on his back. I wonder if I was him, would I even want to be released? One of the things, solutions being touted in Turkey is, maybe you just get sort of free reign of this island. But he's an old man. He's been in prison for a long time. Turkey's changed a lot, but there is still a lot of kind of social anger about the PKK and the things that they did over the 40 years that they were running their campaign.
Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul, thank you for joining us. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio, and joining me now here in the studio is Monocle writer and researcher Julia Lasica and Monocle's senior news editor Chris Cermak. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Hi.
Before we plough on, we should mention that if people want to come to Monocle tomorrow and buy stuff, they can do that. And Chris, you have shown the way by coming to Monocle today and buying stuff. Explain the Monocle garage sale, if you would.
Well, first of all, it's a garage sale, Andrew, because I come from the United States.
It's a garage sale, Chris.
It is a garage sale here at Monocle for today and tomorrow that we are having. And it's basically, a whole bunch of items that Monocle and Confect, for that matter, have had over the past year that are for sale. So do come down. I took a look earlier. I know, Julie, you did as well. In my case, I bought, which unfortunately I ran to the studio and then forgot. Maybe our producer Steph can hold it up. I bought myself a hat. There it is. I got myself a
Listeners,
special...
I can confirm that in the production booth, a hat is being brandished by Steph.
Exactly.
Thank you, Steph. Excellent hat brandishing.
It was actually a good deal, £10. I mean, what can I say to that?
That is remarkable value. A hat for £10.
A hat for £10.
Listeners, that too could be yours.
From the sun.
Julia, did you buy anything at the garage sale?
Which way do you come down on this? You're going to be with Andrew,
Garage.
I'm sure.
Yeah, correct.
Garage.
Obviously.
There's a really nice selection of soaps.
Mm-hmm.
Nice soaps.
I got myself
moisturizers, hand creams, all sorts of really lovely things. Yeah. nice smelling things.
Okay. And beyond that, Chris, you have this week been at Wimbledon.
I have also been at Wimbledon. I took advantage of the fact that I probably shouldn't broadcast it that loudly, should I, on this show? The fact that you can go in the afternoon without a ticket, and it is not that hard to get in. So I just showed up around 2:30 and was in within about half an hour.
When you say in, what did you end up watching?
Well,
was it
this
sort
is
of
you get the ground
mixed
pass.
left-handed doubles.
But mixed doubles semi-final I got to watch, so that was not so bad. And wheelchair tennis and some of the juniors, and then the excellent always Mansour Bahrami, who's this Iranian tennis player who does a whole bunch of trick shots.
I have not been to Wimbledon, but is it one of those things where even if you're not much excited by tennis one way or the other, and I would put myself in that cohort, it is still an event that is worth going to?
It is just a fun atmosphere, absolutely. It's a nice thing to do. It's something that I feel like London celebrates, if you will. And yes, I think you have lots of people who go there who don't actually follow any tennis for 364 days of the year other than the day that they go to Wimbledon. So yes, show up.
And Julia, for the second daily in a row, I think we have a guest on, in this case, i.e. you, who has recently been to Norfolk. I wish to make it clear to our listeners that we are not being sponsored by the Norfolk Tourist Board, but if anybody from the Norfolk Tourist Board is listening, we would be willing to take that call.
Yeah, well, I love Norfolk. Big
They're
endorsement.
not paying us yet,
Big endorsement.
Julia. Play a bit hard to get here.
Big endorsement for Norfolk. I was just there for a family gathering, but it's always lovely to go to Norfolk.
See, there's a slogan for their posters. It's always lovely to go to Norfolk. Which bit of Norfolk do you like, and what do you like about it?
Right bang in the centre of Norfolk.
Okay, controversial. Yeah. So not the seaside.
Very well. I mean, I like the seaside as well, but I like the centre of Norfolk as well. It's very nice. We stick to, it's like a family gathering, so we just stick to like the area that we meet up in, which is someone's beautiful country home. So just lots of walking around wildflower fields and enjoying an English summer.
That does sound lovely. We are going to pivot, though, seamlessly, Julia, to your other homeland, because the past week has seen some of the heaviest bombardments launched against Ukraine cities since Russia began its 72-hour lightning conquest of the country 3.5 years ago. We're not wondering when and how this will all end. Ukrainians have been hoping that the United States, which has regarded their struggle with indifference and irritation since President Donald Trump was returned to office, might have come back into their camp. Trump's recent utterances on the subject have gone as close as he ever has to expressing displeasure with Russia and its president. Chris, first of all, I should also make clear to our listeners that if you're listening to this 24 hours from the moment of this broadcast, we can't be accountable for what might have popped into Donald Trump's head when he wakes up tomorrow. But as of this recording, Chris, does something appear to be shifting in Ukraine's favour?
It is always hard to say, of course, as you were telegraphing there, Andrew, but it feels like something may be shifting. I have to say that, I've watched Trump now for, 10 years.
As
we've
have
had
we
him.
all.
We have always had these theories out there about his closeness to Vladimir Putin. There's been conspiracy theories about it as well. At the very least, I think Donald Trump has always had this respect for autocrats, right? And that includes Vladimir Putin. But also what is so fascinating about some of his comments from this week is that it almost feels like he's still learning on the job, and that is what this is about. It's almost like, the child where the parents say, well, you have to make your own mistakes and learn from them. And that's what it felt a bit like with this comment from him this week, saying we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us from Putin. If you want to know the truth, he's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless. Any manner of people could have told him that over the last 5 to 10 years. Nonetheless, it's as if he suddenly had this realization that, Vladimir Putin talks a lot of bullshit. It felt genuine, you know what I mean? And that's what's, I think, quite striking in some ways with him. You wonder where this comes from. Is it just a tactic, or has he actually had this different moment? And sure enough, after that, suddenly, because of the attacks on Ukraine as well, he is shifting. He has overruled his own defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, who had halted weapons shipments, to now restart them with Ukraine. So there seems to be some kind of shift. How long it will hold? Nobody knows.
Julia, you have seen some indications of this in some Trumpist or pro-Trump media.
Yeah, so I've been following the New York Post, which I wouldn't normally do, but I'm really...
Thank you for your service.
But I'm really enjoying their tracking their Ukraine coverage. I mean, it's been very pro-Ukraine, for the past few years anyway, since the full-scale invasion in 2022, but it's become really directed at Trump since he came to office in the US. Back in February, they had an editorial, like an op-ed, from the editorial board, which was about Trump, President Trump, Putin is playing you, Putin is embarrassing you. And they were saying that all the way back in February. But since then, they've had these editorials from, the board, which have really directly addressed President Trump, and said, for example, Putin's embarrassing you, or Putin's leading you kind of on with these false promises and false sort of illusions that he's trying to spin in front of you. They've also started to publish reports, very graphic reports of what's actually happening on the ground in Ukraine. So, earlier in the week, lots of Ukrainians came across this horrific story of a 1-year-old boy who was in his parents' or grandparents' garden in Kherson, which is a city on the Ukrainian front line. And he was killed by a drone, a Russian FPV drone, a small drone. So a Russian sat there somewhere in the fields of Ukraine, occupied Ukraine, and she directed that drone and killed that 1-year-old boy. That's a very graphic story, and that's the sort of story that does not get into Western headlines. But the New York Post picked this up, and they put this on their front cover, and they said, "Human safari in Kherson," and basically said, "President Trump, are you watching this? Are you looking at this?" So I think that's really interesting. I find it fascinating how they're directly addressing the president and trying to directly sort of point his gaze towards what's happening. And, they're sort of known as Trump's favourite newspaper. So it's quite, that's quite direct,
Just to follow that up, Julia, there's also been some movement attached to Keith Kellogg, which is interesting as well, because as recently as February, when the Foreign Desk was at the Munich Security Conference, several senior European ministers and other officials I spoke to, at least when we were talking off the record, were quite dismissive of Kellogg, thinking he wasn't a serious person and he wasn't an influential player. But that might be changing as well.
Potentially, yeah. I think, what Chris was mentioning before, I think people who actually have direct dealings, have had direct dealings with Russia, are very valuable. Zelensky in Ukraine, for example, was not convinced that Russia was a serious threat against Ukraine when he was also coming into power. So we have to remember that it kind of boggles the mind how much Russia loves to manipulate and how much Russia really draws things out in a way that's sort of humanely impossible to kind of cope with and to understand. And you don't actually believe it until it happens to you. So I think what Keith Kellogg is bringing to this whole situation is actually direct, experience of talking to the Russians. We know he was in Belarus recently with Lukashenko as well, the leader there. And what's also being picked up in media across the world is that his daughter actually spends a lot of time, she lives between the US and Ukraine, and there was a big interview with her yesterday evening in the Times, which, the Kyiv Post had the sort of exclusive back in February, but it's slowly being picked up in newspapers around the world. She tweeted a few weeks ago saying, "Dad, it was really loud here last night in Kyiv." This is when, Russia's, and something is important to say as well, what's shifting as well in the situation is that Russia is massively stepping up its bombardments. They're trying to reach 1,000 drones a night, which is a total nightmare for Ukrainians anywhere in the country. So she has direct experience. He has that being fed back to him from her, and he himself has direct experience of negotiating with the Russians. So I think he's coming to the fore. He's really played the long game here, really stuck it out, really not worried about the embarrassment of what people are saying about him, that he's sort of irrelevant, etc. And he's really stuck it out, and now potentially he's kind of got Trump's ear.
And Chris, just finally on this, there's going to be a new Ukrainian ambassador in DC.
There is going to be a new Ukrainian ambassador, and it's worth a word here on Oksana Makarova, who has been the ambassador for the entirety of this full-scale invasion. She was a very strong voice in D.C. I met her a couple of times, also because sort of Ukraine House, if you will, in Washington was really a big place, an important place for sort of the lobbying effort in D.C. They held a lot of events, and she was a really outspoken advocate for Ukraine in D.C. That said, she was very close with the Biden administration, and she struggled once Donald Trump came to power. Republicans were not particularly happy with her. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, had basically called for her to resign, suggesting that she was biased because she hadn't invited Republicans on a trip at one point to Pennsylvania, I believe it was. So yes, there is going to be a shift. Ukraine has said, well, this is part of a normal shift, rotation, if you will, of diplomats. But nonetheless, I think it's a sign as well that Ukraine is recognizing, maybe learning from some of those early mistakes. Of course, the famous White House meeting with Zelensky as well, learning how it can lobby the Trump administration better. And so that might also be a reason why there is something of a shift. We are also seeing the U.S. Congress shifting. There may be an announcement or an agreement on new sanctions against Russia coming up in the next few days. That's also something to watch for.
Chris Cermak and Julia Lasica, thank you both for joining us. This is the Monocle Daily. You are listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. It is time now for a roundup of food and drinks news. And joining me now in the studio with exactly that is Monica Lillis, Monocle Radio's associate producer and lead producer of The Menu on this here station. Monica, it says here that Ferrero Rocher is buying some cereal.
Yeah, it is. Well, actually, it was quite funny just as you're talking about Kellogg there. So we're on a Kellogg theme, clearly, because it's the
Seamless.
same family. Seamless transition.
It's not like we just throw this together.
So there's big news in the food industry today. Italian multinational Ferrero, who they own 35 brands across the confectionery arena. The likes of Nutella, Kinder, Ferrero Rocher, obviously. They have agreed to purchase the American brand, WK Kellogg. So they that's the cereal subject of Kellogg's. So basically Kellogg's split into two companies in 2023 and the cereal took on its own entity, and so that's Frosties, Rice Krispies, Fruit Loops, Special K, and they've not been doing very well. They've been in debt essentially since they started, and there's many reasons for this, but essentially so two big transatlantic tying together of two companies.
Moving along from serious business news, I have to ask you, it says here in the notes that I have, about possibly the most annoying sentence I have ever read in my entire life, which is Dubai to debut restaurant operated by an AI chef.
Yeah, so this is probably, I'm allowed to say this because I grew up in Dubai, as listeners may know. And Dubai has done the most Dubai thing ever, and essentially they are planning on opening a restaurant near the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. It's called Woohoo, the restaurant.
Which weirdly exactly sums up my feelings on the prospect of an AI chef.
And essentially the food will be assembled by humans for now, but everything else from the menu to the culinary landscape and the ambiance will be put together by a language model called Chef AI Man. I want a portmanteau of AI and man. So essentially, it's been trained on this decades of food science research and molecular composition, etc., etc. So hopefully, it's going to do a good job. I'm slightly sceptical about the whole thing.
Slightly sceptical. Oh, I am so far ahead of you.
Yeah, given the whole AI taking over the world situation, I just think it
removes
from the craft of putting together a menu and having, being the producer of the menu.
But this is kind of a metaphor for the whole AI thing entire, it strikes me, in that, what sane person wants this?
Well, I think that's kind of the point. I don't think any sane people are going to be going to this restaurant, surely. It's just a way to bring AI into the culinary industry and experiment, I suppose. But I guess I don't think anyone actually will want to go and eat at this restaurant.
Oh, people will.
But outside of curiosity, I don't think people will be let's go to Woohoo for dinner,
Speaking as somebody who gets annoyed with hotels that expect you to interact with a QR code rather than just providing a goddamn room service menu, I am arguably not the target audience for
Fair enough.
Woohoo. Looking at more traditional restaurant hubs,
Yes.
Paris is being outshone.
Yeah, so this is based on the world's 50 best restaurants list, which came out a couple of weeks ago. But there was a really nice write-up in the Times this week, and basically essentially saying that for the first time, Bangkok has more entries on this prestigious list than any other city. And essentially, France, and this might be controversial to some perhaps Italian listeners, and perhaps my Italian presenter, but France is essentially, known as the capital of gastronomy worldwide, and usually dominates this kind of list. But in recent years, we've seen more of a shift towards different countries. So I think the world's the best restaurant was in Lima this year. London only has 2, Paris has 4, and Thailand has 6. So it's really exciting, and I think this has got to do with a few things. But
Not exciting to me. Bangkok's miles away.
I know, but it's exciting to see different places in the world. I mean, we can't eat there, but it's exciting to see different places in the world really, have confidence among their cooking and leading with their own culture and their own flavours, rather than kind of the traditional food that we usually expect to be high gastronomy.
Just finally, while we have you here, we are a matter of about 95 minutes away from the broadcast of the next episode of The Menu. What is going to be on it?
Yes, it's a great episode this week, as I say so myself. Do you
mean other weeks it isn't?
Other weeks, sometimes it's better than others. But this week's I'm really excited about. So we're sitting down with the owners of Trillo, which is a North London institution. It's got so many people that go and visit it. Like the one that's come to the top of my head is who's been seen there recently is Charlie XCX. Take of that what you will. And they're celebrating 15 years this year. So we speak to the co-founders and kind of see what it takes to become a staple on the London dining scene, because so many restaurants open and close, and yeah. So it's very exciting. We're also looking into, we've got Petri Burtsoff on the show. He loves to contribute to the menu, our Petri, and he's going to a traditional Finnish restaurant, rediscovering a long forgotten classic. I'll leave it there and just see how you feel about it when you listen to it.
Okay. All I really know about
teaser.
Finnish cuisine is that they eat pea soup on Thursdays.
Oh, I did not know that.
That is a thing, unless the Finns who served me pea soup on a Thursday were lying to me, and it's like the Finnish equivalent of Scots people telling people about haggis hunting. I don't know. But anyway, the pea soup was nice, which I think is what actually matters. Monica Lillis, thank you for joining us. The Menu airs at 2000 London time on Fridays, which is now 93 minutes away. But you can, of course, download that along with all our other programmes whenever you like after their broadcast. You are listening to The Daily. This is the Monocle Daily, and time now for a dip into the world of photography, because much of our photo team has decamped this week to one of the world's biggest photography festivals in the French city of Arles. And joining me now from exactly there are Monocle's photography director, Matt Beeman, and photography editor, Alex Milnes. Matt, let's come to you first. Introduce the Arles Festival, if you would. Why is it a big deal in the photography world?
So Arles is I believe the longest running photography festival in the world, dating back 55 years. I need to check that date, but it's France has always championed photography from its beginnings, and it has always been held here as a much smaller festival, and now it's grown into this big global kind of mecca of photography, where publishers, galleries, agencies, photographers all meet in this fairly small town in the south of France. And all of the local buildings, churches, government buildings get taken over for the summer with exhibitions, new pieces of work, archive work, all sorts of different work, and it gets transformed into a kind of open air gallery. But and this is the opening week, where all of the world's press and participators are here to meet, and then it runs for the whole summer and it's open to the public.
Well, give us a sense of that public, Alex. Obviously, lots of people such as yourselves with a professional interest in photography are descending upon Arles, but who else is there?
So you've got everyone from amateur photographers and camera clubs up to students who've just graduated. Matt and I have both been doing portfolio reviews, so we've met quite a mix of people. Reconnected with photographers we worked with in the past, as well as meeting new photographers there. I met someone who'd just come back from 2 years traveling and decided she wanted to make it as a photographer there. It's just such a wide breadth of people. It's great for us. We're lucky enough to work with such a wide range of photographers around the world, and this is a real meeting point for them as well. So we're hoping to meet up with photographers we've not actually met in person, but have worked with numerous times this afternoon.
And Matt, to come back to you, the theme of this year's Arles exhibition is disobedient images. How is that theme manifest in the images they've chosen?
Well, the main theme actually is On Country, which is a group show of 17 photographers from your home country, Australia, which we went to the exhibition last night and we met all of the participants. And the overall theme of that exhibition is it's about the relationship between the people who live in Australia and their ancestral ties to nature and the country. So that was super interesting.
Yeah,
and some very established photographers involved, like Adam Ferguson, who shot for Monocle, all the way to people I've never heard of before, very young photographers who are making super interesting work. Particularly a girl called Liz Fenwick, who's published this fantastic piece on the Northern Territories and the people who live there and their relationship with the landscape and nature that surrounds them. So yeah, that was super interesting. One of the highlights of the festival so far.
Totally.
And what else has leapt out at the peer review? The quickest one to answer can jump in there.
We've just had a wonderful tour of the Yves Saint Laurent exhibition. So it's an amazing collection of about over 80 photographs taken of him, his creations. It's including photographers such as Irving Peng, Richard Avedon, William Klein, Paolo Reversi, Patrick Danemark-Chellier, right up to Inez and Vinood. And then I think the final portrait is very elderly Yves Saint Laurent taken by Jürgen Teller. And then within the exhibition, you have this kind of history of him and his brand, but then also there's an exhibition within the exhibition of kind of his life. So there's pictures of him as a baby, family albums, goes up to amazing magazine spreads from Vogue and Paris Match, as well as kind of more personal items as well.
And what's an exhibition like this for the peer review who spend all day, every day thinking about the images that should go into a magazine? Do you come away from it with lots of new ideas?
Yeah, actually, even an exhibition like that, which is, we've seen a lot of these pictures before over and over and again. It's great to see the actual analog prints of them on the wall, but actually looking back at some of the pictures that in magazines like Paris Match from the 60s and 70s and 80s, they were really creative and actually
absolutely incredible to see.
Some of the pictures would not be amiss in the most contemporary fashion magazines today. So it's quite inspiring and interesting.
Yeah, it reignites an interest in photographers I'd not looked at for a while as well. So I find that really nice. And yeah, it's just in general a very inspirational place to be.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like a town-sized vote of confidence in the art of photography, but I'm just wondering if you're having any conversations with people about how confident they are in the future of photography, when obviously any clown with a smartphone can now conjure up images which are barely distinguishable from the real thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of discussion here around AI and the rise of digital AI created photography. But I think from what we've seen, especially the more contemporary photography we've seen, there's been a real shift back towards people shooting on film and a much more analog style of photography. And I think it feels like a bit of a backlash to this kind of perfect image that can be created now, and that people want to show the imperfections that you might get from shooting on film and the analog style of photography. So yeah, it's interesting. We'll see.
And it goes back to, I guess, being Monocle, our love of print. I think people want that physical thing again. So we're seeing people shooting on film, printing in the darkroom. Like people I saw today and yesterday in portfolio reviews, the majority of it was all shot on film and hand prints as well. So it's really amazing to see that.
And it's also interesting. There's a lot of big brands involved this year. So Kering have launched their first annual award, which has been won by Nan Goldin, and Dior was sponsoring an exhibition. Who else? Pictet,
clients of ours,
their prize last night. So there's a lot of interest from bigger fashion and global brands in the festival, which is great.
And just finally and quickly then, what does tonight hold for you?
I think we've got a few more meetings this afternoon. We're going to try and fit in a couple of more shows, and then we will be in Plastiforum in the middle of the town. We'll probably have maybe 1 or 2 rosés, I think.
Later on, I think there's a magazine live show, which is devised by Florence Martin Kessler, and that's taking place in the amphitheatre in the middle of the town, and it's a live magazine. So they have journalists and photographers and editors who are describing stories that they've shot live on a stage. So it could be quite fun.
Yeah.
Matt Beeman, Monocle's photography director, and Alex Milnes, Monocle's photography editor. Thank you both for joining us from Arles. This is The Daily with me, Andrew Muller, and finally on today's show, our weekly assessment of how much the wiser we are for having endured another 7 days. We learned this week that promises made by the administration of US President Donald Trump are of perhaps debatable value.
I can't believe it.
Wow.
Okay.
Crazy.
What the
I've
hell?
never heard that before.
Oh my God.
Surprised as you were, etc. We learned specifically that Attorney General, at least until Trump fires her and calls her an idiot and a loser who he has at any rate barely ever spoken to or indeed heard of, Pam Bondi, who as recently as February said this about releasing files naming the clients of unlamented people trafficker Jeffrey Epstein.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
Had completed her review and discovered that the list of Epstein's clients was in fact not on her desk or indeed anywhere else.
Donald Trump and his administration is today left holding the bag after a conspiracy theory that has animated and juiced his base and fueled the rise of multiple key members of his innermost cabinet suddenly and spectacularly imploded.
We learned, yes, that there never was any such list. Don't know where anybody would have got such an idea from, and that, furthermore, that really none of this is that big a deal anyway, and everyone should just stop going on about it, honestly. And we learned this on the obviously unarguable authority of someone who Epstein himself once called his closest friend.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years.
We learned, in fairness, that the president had far, far more pressing concerns.
The only question is, will I gold leaf the corners? You could maybe tell me my cabinet could take a vote. You see the top line moldings.
And are we not all, in a very real sense, wondering whether to gold leaf the corners of the top line moldings?
I think so.
Anyway. We learned that among the many things far more interesting to Trump than any list he very definitely isn't on is diplomacy, and we learned that he was especially intent on outreach to Africa.
Oh no.
From which continent he welcomed several leaders to the White House and dazzled them with both his deeply researched knowledge of their region and its issues and his patient willingness to learn still more.
If I could just say it's, your name and your country would be great. Thank you, please.
We learned that he was especially taken with President Joseph Boakai of Liberia.
Well, thank you. It's such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Probably in Liberia, where the official language is English, as might be expected of a country founded by black Americans, whose flag is red and white stripes next to a blue panel with a star on it, and whose capital is named after the 5th President of the United States, as you'd reckon all but James Monroe's successors but Trump and perhaps one other would have known, i.e. Millard Fillmore, who was just a total Dumbo.
What a fool.
Stupid 13th president only carried one state in 1856, and that was Maryland, which hardly counts.
Idiot.
What a loser.
What kind of a name is Millard?
What kind of idiot idea was the Compromise of 1850 anyway? Stupid.
Couldn't get nominated for a second term by his own party. What a deadbeat.
You know what? I really don't like him.
We recorded that like 4 years ago, and you said we'd never get any more use out of it. Who's wasting everyone's afternoon now, eh? But we learned that there is one African with whom Trump is unimpressed, or at least significantly less impressed than he once was.
I've never met a nice South African. No, he's never met a nice South African.
Now, the feud between President Trump and Elon Musk is escalating this morning. The president called the world's richest man a train wreck who's gone completely off the rails.
We learned that the reason for this further waning of a relationship, which was once as close as that of Abbott and Costello, was that Musk had found the time in between turning his AI chatbot Grok into Reinhard Heydrich to found a new US political party to rival the entrenched Republican and Democratic duopoly. And we learned that Musk's new party would not be joining the short list of people or entities who Trump has publicly wished well.
I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well.
Which, as of this broadcast, still consists in its entirety of Jeffrey Epstein's principal procurer, Ghislaine Maxwell, currently doing 20 years and who had been arrested shortly before Trump made that statement. We learned, returning to the present day, that Trump believes his former sidekick's ambitions are impractical.
We can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous.
Indeed. Imagine an American political party entirely consecrated to the whim of an erratic billionaire with an ego the size of Jupiter, seething in a demented parallel reality, reinforced by an adoring legion of barely literate supplicant rubes whose brains have been eaten by social media conspiracy theories, and imagine American voters electing such an entity. Absurd, could never happen, etc. We have learned, however, that Musk's movement will be called the America Party. That was an eagle. We have not learned which of America's signature colours it will adopt, though with red taken by the Republicans and blue by the Democrats, that only really leaves... And we remain agog to learn whether or not it will go better than most things Musk launches.
3, 2, 1...
For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller. And that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Hannah Lucinda-Smith, Julia Lasica, Chris Cermak, Monica Lillis, Matt Beeman and Alex Milnes. Today's show was produced by Chris Cermak and researched by Henry King. Our sound engineer was Steph Chungu. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily returns at the same time on Monday. Have a great weekend and thanks for listening.